Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Lillian Gish was one of the most iconic and enduring figures in the history of American cinema, often referred to as the First Lady of American cinema. Her career spanned over 75 years. From the silent film era to the modern age of television and stage. With her ethereal beauty, expressive face, and exceptional emotional range, Gish helped define the art of screen acting at a time when film was still finding its language. Early life. Lillian Diana Gish was born on October 14, 1893, in Springfield, Ohio. She and her younger sister, Dorothy Gish, were raised by their mother after their father abandoned the family. From a young age, Lillian performed in stage productions, and by the early 1910s, she and Dorothy entered the world of film. Silent film stardom. Gish's film career took off when she began working with pioneering director D.W. Griffith. She appeared in his groundbreaking 1915 epic The Birth of a Nation, which, despite its controversy, became a cornerstone in film history. She also starred in Intolerance, 1916, Broken Blossoms, 1919, Way Down East, 1920, and Orphans of the Storm, 1921. Her performance in Broken Blossoms is widely regarded as a masterclass in silent film acting. She was known for portraying fragile, virtuous heroines, often enduring great suffering with stoic grace and emotional depth. Gish was also a keen observer and student of the filmmaking process, often involved in editing and production decisions. Sound era and later career. Unlike many silent film stars, Gish successfully transitioned to sound films. However, she largely shifted her focus to stage work during the 1930s and 1940s. She returned to the screen in notable later roles, including Duel in the Sunday, 1946, The Night of the Hunter, 1955, and The Whales of August, 1987, for which she received critical acclaim at age 93. Legacy and honors. Lillian Gish was more than a movie star. She was a film artist who elevated the medium and helped shape the language of cinematic storytelling. Her long and varied career earned her numerous accolades, including an honorary Academy Award in 1971 for her contributions to film. She also received a Kennedy Center honor in 1982 and a National Medal of Arts in 1984. Death. Lillian Gish passed away peacefully in her sleep on February 27, 1993, at the age of 99. She left behind a legacy of elegance, artistry, and resilience, and remains a towering figure in the history of cinema. A deepening film legacy. Lillian Gish's work with D.W. Griffith revolutionized silent film acting. Rather than rely on theatrical exaggeration, Gish mastered the art of subtle facial expression, delicate gestures, and internalized emotion, pioneering a naturalistic acting style that became foundational to screen performance. She famously said, "What you get from a silent film is almost like music, it gives you feeling." Her performance in Way Down East, 1920, is legendary, particularly the climactic scene where her character floats unconscious on an ice floe down a frozen river. Gish insisted on doing the dangerous stunt herself, spending hours in freezing water to achieve the realism Griffith demanded. She suffered nerve damage in her fingers from that shoot, proof of her dedication to her craft. Two-women collaboration with Dorothy Gish. Lillian's sister, Dorothy Gish, was also a popular actress, more known for comedy roles, while Lillian often portrayed tragic heroines. The sisters starred together in several films and remained close throughout their lives, despite Dorothy's lighter roles and Lillian's often tragic ones. Both were highly respected and beloved by audiences. Face mask, stage and television work. In addition to her work in film, Lillian Gish had a distinguished theater career. She appeared in productions of Hamlet, Camille, and Uncle Vanya, working with respected directors like George Cukor and Jed Harris. Later in life, she appeared in television dramas, lending her timeless presence to a new medium. Even into her 80s and 90s, she continued to perform, notably in the 1987 film The Whales of August. Opposite Bette Davis, two legends on screen together for the first and only time. Brain, intellect and philosophy. Gish was highly intelligent and philosophical about her craft. She was a strong advocate for silent cinema as a pure form of expression, often lamenting the industry's obsession with dialogue and spectacle. She believed that silent films, like classical music or ballet, communicated with a kind of universal poetry. She once remarked, "We had to be poets with our faces and historians with our eyes." She also championed artistic integrity over fame or fortune, often refusing roles she considered beneath her or lacking substance. Classical building recognition and influence. Over the years, Gish became a symbol of film history itself. She was honored with Academy Honorary Award, 1971, American Film Institute Lifetime Achievement Award, 1984, Kennedy Center Honors, 1982, National Medal of Arts, 1984, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her influence extended to filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, Robert Altman, and Francis Ford Coppola, who praised her work and often referenced it in their own films. Ingmar Bergman reportedly admired her spiritual intensity. Dove final years and death. Lillian Gish never married and had no children. She once said that her true love was her career. She spent her final years living in New York City, surrounded by her books, memorabilia, and letters from film legends like Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin. She died in her sleep on February 27, 1993, at age 99. Closing the final chapter on one of the longest and most remarkable careers in entertainment history. Champion of the silent film era. In her later life, Lillian Gish became one of the most prominent advocates for the preservation of silent films, many of which were being lost due to deterioration or neglect. She tirelessly worked with film historians and archives, including the Museum of Modern Art and the Library of Congress, to rescue and restore early cinema. She believed that silent films were not merely entertainment but cultural artifacts and pure cinematic poetry. "When I see what we have lost, I want to cry. We worked so hard, and those films are history." She helped establish appreciation for silent cinema as a legitimate art form at a time when it was still often dismissed as quaint or obsolete. Woman student, a feminist in her own right. Although Lillian Gish was a product of her era and rarely discussed feminism openly, her life and career made her a trailblazer for women in film. She negotiated her own contracts, demanding creative input and financial transparency long before it was common for actresses to do so. She directed one film in 1920, Remodeling Her Husband, one of the earliest female-directed films in Hollywood. Gish turned down roles she felt were exploitative or compromised artistic integrity, choosing substance over stardom. She often played strong-willed survivors, despite their delicate exteriors, characters who endured adversity with moral strength. Her independent spirit and long-standing commitment to her craft set a quiet but powerful example for women in film. She lived by the belief that integrity, intelligence, and restraint were essential for true artistry. Movie camera collaborations and influence. Gish's most legendary collaborations were with D.W. Griffith, whose films helped define the grammar of cinema. But her influence reached beyond him. She also worked with Victor Sjöström, The Swedish Master, in The Scarlet Letter, 1926, and The Wind, 1928, the latter considered one of her finest performances. Exploring female repression and psychological trauma. Charles Laughton, who directed her in The Night of the Hunter, 1955, where she played a protective old woman facing down evil. Her quiet power in this role became a spiritual anchor of the film. John Huston, Bette Davis, and Vincent Price, all of whom admired her craft and discipline. In turn, she influenced generations of actors including Meryl Streep, Sally Field, and Cate Blanchett, who have cited Gish's performances as formative. Sports medal honors after death. After her passing, the Lillian Gish Prize was established by her estate, one of the largest arts prizes in the United States. It is awarded annually to a person who has made an outstanding contribution to the beauty of the world and to mankind's enjoyment and understanding of life. Past recipients have included Spike Lee, Laurie Anderson, and Merce Cunningham. There is also the Lillian Gish Theater at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. Though this has been the subject of debate due to her association with the birth of a nation, still, many argue that her artistic contribution far outweighs her youthful involvement in that controversial film. Dove Final Reflections. Even at 90, Lillian Gish could speak eloquently on the nature of film and life. In one of her last interviews, she said, "I've never been in style, so I can't go out of style. I've just been here." And that's true. Lillian Gish didn't chase trends or popularity, but left behind a timeless legacy of artistry, integrity, and grace. She embodied the early promise of cinema. Silent, yes, but powerfully expressive. Philosophy on aging and longevity. Lillian Gish aged with remarkable dignity and clarity of purpose. She remained intellectually active into her 90s, granting interviews, writing, and attending film retrospectives. Unlike many stars of her era who faded into obscurity, Gish embraced her age and used it to offer perspective on art and history. She believed that a meaningful life came from discipline, curiosity, and work. "I've never stopped learning, and I've never stopped working. That's the secret." She never saw herself as a star in the modern sense. Her identity was always as an actress, a worker, a servant of the story. She once quipped, "Stars are people we fix in the sky, not actors who go to work every day like everyone else." Paint palette. Silent film as high art. To Gish, silent cinema was a higher form of storytelling, closer to ballet, opera, and pantomime than to the theater or modern film. She believed silence was not a limitation, but an artistic liberation. It required emotional purity. It transcended language. It allowed image and gesture to carry the soul of a story. This aesthetic shaped her performances, which were spare, elegant, and deeply emotional. Her belief in restraint and suggestion rather than melodrama or spectacle made her a master of silent nuance. She deeply respected directors who shared this vision, including Victor Sjöström, whose Scandinavian background contributed a sense of psychological realism and visual poetry to their collaborations. Heartbreak. Personal life and solitude. Lillian Gish never married, which was a conscious choice. While she had several romantic relationships, rumored to include Charles Jewell, D.W. Griffith, and George Jean Nathan, she maintained her independence. She said that a traditional marriage would have hindered her dedication to her work. "I never could have given myself to both a man and a career. I had to choose." She often said her real love was the camera. And perhaps the camera loved her back. It immortalized her in a way no relationship could. She also took care of her sister Dorothy until her death in 1968, after which Lillian entered a more reclusive phase, though still appearing for tributes and festivals. Books. Writing and memoir. Gish was also a thoughtful writer. Her memoirs, especially the movies Mr. Griffith and Me, 1969, are considered essential reading for anyone studying the history of American film. The book not only chronicled her career but reflected on the nature of cinematic art and her lifelong partnership with Griffith, a complex and controversial figure. She never shied away from the contradictions of Griffith's legacy, defending him artistically while acknowledging the problematic nature of the birth of a nation. You can't erase history, but you can learn from it. Speech balloon praise from peers and historians. Lillian Gish was widely admired by her contemporaries and by later generations. Some key tributes include Mary Pickford, who called her the most gifted actress we ever had in the silent era. Orson Welles, who praised her performance in The Wind as the greatest ever put on film. Martin Scorsese, who championed her during preservation campaigns and said she embodied cinema's moral heart. Robert Mitchum, her co-star in The Night of the Hunter, who called her pure class, more than the rest of us combined. Candle enduring symbol of the silent era to this day, Lillian Gish remains a symbol of cinema's origins and its artistic possibilities. She was a living bridge between the dawn of movies and the modern era. When she passed in 1993, many said it marked the true end of the silent film era. Her name is often spoken in the same breath as legends like Greta Garbo, Bette Davis, and Katharine Hepburn, but Gish was there before all of them, helping to invent the screen actress as we know her. Patriotism and wartime contributions. During both World Wars, Lillian Gish was deeply involved in support efforts for U.S. troops and national morale. During World War I, she took part in Liberty Bond drives and performed in benefit productions. During World War II, though no longer a household name, she used her influence to support the arts and entertainment for soldiers overseas. She didn't see patriotism as loud or performative, it was quiet, consistent, and dignified. Much like her screen presence, she often spoke of her gratitude for being an American artist with freedom to express herself. Compass cultural and historical bridge. Lillian Gish's life was extraordinary not just for its length, but for what it spanned. She began acting in 1902 in vaudeville, starred in silent films from 1912 onward, acted in sound films and television through the 1980s, lived long enough to see the rise of digital filmmaking and cable television. She was a living witness to the birth of Hollywood, the first Academy Awards, the Great Depression, the rise and fall of the studio system, and the complete transformation of American media. Film historian Kevin Brownlow described her as not a relic of history, but a part of its living DNA. Brain views on art and society. Lillian Gish was deeply philosophical about the relationship between morality and art. She believed that film had an ethical responsibility to uplift rather than degrade. She was never prudish, but she was opposed to what she called cheap sensationalism. She often spoke about the duty of artists to serve the audience, not with comfort or entertainment alone, but with truth and beauty. In an interview late in life, she said, "Art should elevate the soul. It should make you feel something deeper, something finer. That's why I loved silent films, they reached for the soul without saying a word." Ballot box. With ballot politics and public stances, Gish was politically reserved and private. Unlike many of her peers, she rarely campaigned publicly for politicians. Her values leaned conservative, rooted in personal responsibility, hard work, and spiritual reflection. However, she never aligned with extremism, and she believed in the importance of education, the arts, and human dignity. She supported arts funding, film preservation, and women's advancement, though she did not associate herself with feminism as a movement. face masked the duality of her screen image. Lillian Gish was both the embodiment of innocence and a steel-nerved survivor. On screen, she often portrayed women who were victimized, abused, betrayed, or driven into madness, but she infused these roles with a quiet but unbreakable strength. In Broken Blossoms, her abused character finds moments of transcendence. In The Wind, she descends into madness, yet the film never reduces her to hysteria. In The Night of the Hunter, she becomes the moral guardian of innocence against evil. She created an archetype, the woman whose fragility is deceptive, whose strength is interior, and whose endurance is spiritual. Classical building legacy in academia and culture today, Gish is a staple in film history courses around the world. Her work is required viewing for students of acting, direction, and early American cinema. She is studied alongside Sergei Eisenstein, F.W. Murnau, and D.W. Griffith as a contributor not only to performance, but to the very grammar of film. Despite controversy around Griffith and The Birth of a Nation, serious scholars emphasize Gish's artistic legacy and personal integrity, separating her from the ideological baggage of that film. Shooting star. Final thought. A star beyond time. Lillian Gish wasn't just a star, she was a foundational artist, a moral compass, and a cultural touchstone. She never relied on scandal, beauty tricks, or fame chasing. Instead, she chose craft over celebrity, silence over noise, grace over spectacle. She once said, "We used to look up at the stars, now we look down at celebrities." In that, she was not only referring to the heavens, but to the kind of timeless, unreachable quality that made her one of cinema's most enduring lights. Artistic method. Acting without words. Lillian Gish developed a performance style rooted in interiority. Her greatest strength was her ability to convey thought and emotion without dialogue, through subtle eye movements, stillness punctuated by gesture, physical vulnerability paired with moral defiance. Her performances were often spiritually expressive, especially in roles that placed her at the mercy of cruelty or fate. She once said, "You had to think it, not show it. The camera reads your soul." She believed the best silent acting came not from exaggeration, but from an emotional truth so clear that words became unnecessary. This is why her performances still resonate, they feel psychologically modern. Dove mystique and minimalism. Unlike many of her peers, Gish avoided flamboyance in both her life and image. She didn't cultivate controversy, nor did she chase headlines. Her mystique came from restraint. She rarely wore heavy makeup, even on camera. She didn't smoke, drink, or indulge in the party culture of early Hollywood. She carefully protected her public dignity, never revealing too much, yet always gracious. This subtlety gave her an aura of timelessness. In a sea of actresses known for glamour or scandal, Gish's name became synonymous with grace, depth, and longevity. Camera iconography. More than just an image, photos of Gish, from the windswept heroine of The Wind to the battered child bride of Broken Blossoms, have become emblematic of early cinema itself. Her face is etched into cinematic history not only because of its beauty, but because of what it communicated. Innocence without naivete, pain without defeat, devotion without ego. She wasn't just a performer, she was an emblem of vulnerability transformed into quiet courage. Compass. Personal code. Values over vanity. Even at the height of her fame, Gish lived modestly. She was disciplined, frugal, and deeply spiritual. A lifelong Episcopalian, she found comfort in ritual and reflection. She saw her career not as self-glorification, but as a calling. The only excuse for being an artist is to bear witness, with honesty and devotion. She never stopped learning, reading widely, keeping up with younger artists, and advocating for the preservation of film as both history and art. Receipt. Controversy and historical reassessment. In recent years, Lillian Gish's name has entered political and cultural debates, particularly because of her role in D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. Some institutions, such as Bowling Green State University, have renamed theaters and buildings that once honored her, while the film itself has rightly been condemned for its racist content. Historians and artists continue to argue that Gish's legacy should be considered in full. She was 20 years old when she acted in The Birth of a Nation, with no control over its content or ideology. She spent the rest of her career portraying characters that fought injustice, protected innocence, and embodied empathy. She never endorsed the film's message, and dedicated her later life to more humanistic storytelling. Her defenders, among them Martin Scorsese and the Film Foundation, have stressed that erasing Gish erases one of the most important women in cinema's founding. Film projector modern relevance and revival. Lillian Gish's films are regularly screened at film festivals, taught in cinema schools, and featured in retrospectives worldwide. Thanks to restorations and streaming, a new generation is discovering her artistry. Her image is used in film essays, fine art, and fashion editorials. Silent film lovers often cite her as the greatest actress of the era, above even Garbo or Bo. Critics frequently point out how contemporary her performances feel: natural, honest, and emotionally layered. Gish has become a symbol of lost cinematic purity, a reminder that film once aspired to be more than spectacle, it aimed for the soul. Sparkles a legacy that lives on. Lillian Gish was not a trend. She was a foundation. She helped shape not just an industry, but a language of emotion that modern film still depends on. She died just before the internet age, but her presence continues, quiet, watchful, eternal. "I've never played a woman who was beaten in the end," she once said. No matter what happened, she survived. So did Lillian Gish. She survived fame, changing technology, and the weight of time. And her spirit survives in every image, every glance, every frame. International reverence. Lillian Gish was not only revered in the United States, she was deeply respected across the globe, especially in France, where the French New Wave directors like François Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard spoke admiringly of her understated acting and spiritual presence. Godard once called her l'âme du cinéma muet, the soul of silent cinema. Sweden, where her collaborations with Victor Sjöström, particularly The Wind and the Scarlet Letter, are considered masterworks of emotional realism and Nordic cinematic minimalism. Japan, where Gish was compared to traditional no and kabuki performers for her stillness and emotional intensity. In international film festivals, Cannes, Venice, Berlin, she was often featured in retrospectives and received standing ovations well into her 90s. Dove spiritual core and faith. Gish's performances were often likened to spiritual rituals. And that wasn't accidental. She was deeply spiritual throughout her life, not evangelical but reverent. She believed the artist's role was to serve something greater than self, and for her, that meant living simply, remaining honest to her art, honoring silence and stillness, seeking beauty in truth, not glamour. Her favorite Bible verse was reportedly, "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm chapter 46 verse 10. And
Bye bye. Thanks for watching. Bye.